Hello everyone and welcome back to the Educated Call Snap channel. How you doing? So today we're going to be fully covering Nimrod, kind of going over the thoughts, how it ended up playing, whether I think you should buy the card, buy the pass, and just some deck guides for the people that do have the pass, want to play it, see in the future, just some ideas to play with. So let's get started. So first off, right, do I recommend? Ooh, this is the wrong scene. First off, do I recommend to buy the pass? As you can see, I have not bought the pass yet. And I actually don't think I will buy the pass. Now, not to say that Nimrod's a bad card, but if it's not a card you're going to be playing with instantly, is it a card that you think will see a lot of play in the future? Like, do I think meta decks will form around this card? And my answer, I would say realistically, is no. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because it overall functions as a destroy deck, right? Overall, it's a card that you put in destroy packages. And the issue with destroy packages is there's a lot of counterplay to destroy already with armor in the game and things like Cosmo just being two very popular tech cards that a lot of people like to play in their decks. It's very easy to accidentally build decks that already counter what Nimrod wants to do. Now, do I think, oh, there's never going to be a meta when Nimrod is in? I don't think so. I do think there will be metas when Nimrod will be like a very viable, very strong choice. But essentially, as a content creator, what people would argue is that I need to get all the Series 5 cards because it makes it easier to get Series 5 cards, etc., etc. But the way that the system works, the likelihood you get a Series 5 card is super low. So I'm not really planning on getting all the Series 5 cards. I'm really just planning on getting the ones that matter, essentially, which are the big bads and then any of the upcoming ones that end up happening. So eventually all these cards will end up being Series 3 if you can wait 6 months. So if I'm that patient, which I think I will be, there's no real force for me to buy these. So I think for most players it's the same. If you are willing to wait 6 months and you don't think there's going to be a very viable deck coming out for this card in that time, then there's not really a reason to spend the currency. So that's my advice there. I don't really think you need to buy this card. It doesn't give me Zabu vibes. It doesn't give me Silver Surfer vibes. So that's good, right? You're not always going to be in a position where you feel like you can skip a card, but this one I do feel like you can skip. Modark as well was kind of skippable, but I still see a decent amount of that deck. So it's just better to have the option to skip a card, and I definitely think Nimrod fits into that. So that's my thoughts on whether you should buy it or not and the reasons behind it. I don't think it's a bad card. It's just a card that has counters baked into the archetype you want to play with this, essentially. Now let's go talk about some of the decks you can make with this, some of the ideas that people have used to run Nimrod. So here we have the first deck list. So this one is Electro ramp, and I think Electro is like the most common way people want to be using this because you can go Electro into Nimrod into Destroyer, and then you still have another turn to really do some other plays, whether you're going Zola or whether you're going whatever you want, really. And the nice thing with Electro is you have other win conditions besides the Nimrod. You have the Black Panther win condition, you have the Doctor Doom Odin win condition, and you have just Sunspot as an early game card. You have an armor if you want to protect one of your units. And then you also have the Sandman in case people are doing flooding late game options. You don't really flood that much, so. And then you also have Wave. So instead of doing something like Electro, you can just wave. So you have a lot of ways to really maneuver around this deck list, and I think that's really one of the most common ways you want to play Nimrod. You want to play with Electro and then have a couple of finishers that make sense. Destroyer is very popular. Zola is also something that does work, and if you can find other cards that work well with this, like this deck does, that's kind of how you want to do it. Next one is also an Electro deck, kind of. It's kind of Electro, but not necessarily. It just has ramp, right? So it has Psylocke instead of the wave for ramp, still running the Sunspot. But this one runs Shuri. And right now, Shuri is super strong. So if you could add Shuri into your deck, it's not usually a bad idea. The only downside is a lot of people know that Shuri is a very popular deck list, so maybe they're running counters to Shuri already just as a precaution. So if you're seeing a lot of Shuri counterplay, then maybe you don't want to be running a deck like this. But you just ramp into Nimrod or Black Panther, and then you can Zola either the Nimrod or the Black Panther, and then you still have the Destroyer angle, and then you still have the Dr. Doom Odin angle. So it's just giving you a lot of options in how you want to finish out the game. But the early game, of ramping is still the same. It just has slightly different payoffs than the one we had before. So still something you can do. See if you like this one. I always say try all the decks that look interesting to you, and then the ones that you're finding success with, keep playing them. And if you're not finding success, then switch it out. So that's usually my idea there. Now, next up, this one's a more destroy-centric version of the Nimrod angle. So we still have Electro, we still have Nimrod, Zola, Destroyer. That engine is still the same. But now instead we're adding a lot more destroy pieces. So now we're adding the Bucky Barnes, the Venom, the Wolverine Carnage, all the ways to trigger Nimrod again. And then because we have all that, we can add in a death to really be that final win condition. And you still have the wave with death synergy as well. So if you want to go wave on 5 and then do something with the free death or the very cheap death, you can do that as well. So this is just more destroy focused. It still has the weaknesses of if they play armor in the right lanes, it could really mess you up. But overall, that's the idea here with this particular deck list. Next up, we have another Shuri list. This one is a little bit more Shuri-centric. This one's definitely more like I'm playing a Shuri deck, that I'm playing a Nimrod deck. But it just happens like Shuri works very well with Nimrod because you can go Shuri and then double the Nimrod, and then anytime the Nimrod dies, you get 2 copies of it, so it doubles again. So that's why Shuri's a very popular card to put on top of the Nimrod engine. But this one's definitely more indexed into the Shuri aspect of the deck compared to the first one we had with a Shuri in it, where that was more teched into the Nimrod aspect of the deck. So you still have the Shuri Red Skull Taskmaster combo. You also have Zola combo. You also have the She-Hulk combo. And then you're trying to get the Shuri earlier with the Zabu or the Psylocke. You can also use Psylocke for the Nimrod if you want to get the Nimrod out early, but you don't really have the payoffs for getting that one out early compared to the other decks where you were able to Carnage or Deathlock or something. Here you're really just trying to get the Wong into the Shuri, into the huge Nimrod, into the Zola, or the huge whatever into the Taskmaster, that kind of thing. That's really what you're trying to do here. So this one's definitely another angle that can work. Seems pretty good if you like to do that kind of thing. And then the next one, even though this one's pretty far back, I think this one showcases the other really viable aspect of playing Nimrod, which is with Galactus, of course. Unfortunately, it's a big bad, right? So it's not super accessible to a lot of players. But if you can play Galactus Nimrod, it's definitely a viable alternative. Now, you can play Galactus in a lot of different compositions, so you don't have to play Nimrod with Galactus, but it's a very clean combo where if you play it correctly, the Galactus will kill off your units in a set order that can make you trigger Nimrod multiple times and just have a board full of Nimrods with the Galactus play. So what this allows you to do is you can go Shuri into Nimrod and then have a huge turn 6 with the Galactus as your location is being destroyed. Or you can just go like Shuri into Hobgoblin, right? -16 power there, then drop the Galactus. And you can do something like with the Green Goblin, with the Wolverine. It's very easy to have a ton of negative power in that particular location to set up your Galactus play. So this is definitely an annoying deck. Very annoying deck if your opponent doesn't have any counterplay for this, but if you can make it work, yeah, it does a lot. So this is definitely something you can do. And there's a lot of different Galactus lists. You don't necessarily have to do it like this. This one's definitely focused on the turn 6 version of the Galactus, but you could add Electro and then have Galactus be turn 5 and then turn 6 you do other things. But usually if you're doing a turn 5 or earlier Galactus, you're usually doing other things as well. So that's why this turn 6 one works a lot better for the Nimrod engine. And then last but not least, I do want to have a deck list for people that aren't pool 3. Because it's a season pass, you're able to get this relatively early. So there might be some players that are still in pool 2, haven't really went far into pool 3. I still want to give them something that can work. So this is a Nimrod deck, but it's definitely pool 2 centric. If you're past pool 2, I definitely wouldn't fully rely on this. But it kind of gives you the Nimrod on 5, and then turn 6, you're going to Deathlock Carnage and try to get a ton of copies of the Nimrod down. If you don't hit that, then you can just Travis, and then you have the counterplay of Shang-Chi Enchantress in terms of the matchups, and Okoye just kind of is a nice bluff target, but you have a lot of early game to work with. Killmonger into pool 2 is really good. There's a lot of people running tons of ones. So this is just like a control deck, but it has the death engine, and you have the Nimrod to play if you get that set up. So that's kind of the idea there, to really just give you something to do. So overall, Nimrod isn't necessarily core. I don't think you're going to be too sad that you don't have this early. Zabu was the one that I really recommended people still get, and I still see a lot of deck lists that can use Zabu, especially if you have a Darkhawk still. So that one is really the one, but there needs to be some season passes that are skippable. They're like, it's not, I don't think it's super healthy to force you to buy every single one because they're so core to the meta. I don't think this is that core. You can play with it, but as you take a look at all these decks that we're suggesting, you don't really need the Nimrod. Like, this is an Electro deck normally, and you don't have to play Nimrod with this. Same thing here. This is an Electro deck. You don't have to play Nimrod. This is a Destroy deck. You don't have to play Nimrod. This is a Shuri deck. You don't have to play Nimrod. This is a Galactus deck. You don't have to play Nimrod, right? So, like, and this is just a pool 2 deck. So all these decks that we're talking about, the Nimrod isn't necessary to have a functioning deck, right? And that's the key there. Where a lot of other lists, a lot of the other pieces that you get, you need to have a particular card, otherwise the deck doesn't function. Where with Nimrod, it's a nice piece, it's a good card, it works, but it's not a key piece in that if you don't have the card, you can't run the deck. So like Darkhawk is something where if you don't have Darkhawk, there's a lot of decks you cannot run. If you don't have Galactus, there's a lot of decks you can't run. If you have Thanos, Shuri, there's a lot of decks you cannot run because they're key pieces and the deck fundamentally does not work without it. Nimrod's a card that even if you don't have, you can still make a deck run without it. So that's the difference there. So overall, hope you got a good understanding of our thoughts on Nimrod, why we're not really suggesting it if you don't want it. Now, obviously, the season pass is like quote unquote a good value. If you are going to spend any money, season pass is the first part of that spending budget. But if you don't want to spend anything, you can definitely ignore the season pass. Hope you guys liked it. See you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful rest of your day.